All right. Welcome back to another episode of VW ID Talk podcast. We're so excited to have you back with us today. And we are excited to be talking about the ID.Buzz with Tim Healey, who's driven it. I'm your host, Wes, and Jan, your other host, is going to tell you about Tim.
Yes, Tim, it's so excited to have you here today. So Tim Healey is the managing editor at Truth About Cars, and he's a very seasoned automotive journalist. So Tim, it's our pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So you have recently been at a VW event in California. Can you tell us a little bit more about that event and what you have seen?
Yeah, so the launch event for the ID.Buzz, the 2025 Volkswagen ID.Buzz, was in San Francisco, in Marin County, just north of the city, just across the Golden Gate Bridge. So that was kind of so where I was. I got to drive the vehicle just a couple days ago.
Awesome.
Very cool. Very cool.
I'm very jealous. I think a lot of people out there are as well. I've been telling people that my daughter has decided this is her dream car. She's 13 and she's not going to be getting this. So, but I think this might be what we would have gotten if it were available when the ID4 came out. So we're pretty excited about it. What were your initial impressions?
So the best part about the vehicle is it's really well packaged. It's very roomy inside, and that includes the second and third row. I'm on the taller side, a little bit bigger guy, and I had no problem accessing the third row on a vehicle. Nice. So we drove two vehicles. One had captain's chairs. One had the bench in the second row. I did not have a chance to get in the back of the one with the captain's chairs. But the one at the bench, both the second row and third row were quite roomy to sit in and really easy to climb around. The windshield's huge, so visibility out the front is great. It's on the same platform as ID4, that NEB, so it is a little bit similar in driving, except it's obviously bigger. So it feels, you can feel in a twisty road, you can feel how long it is, but it's sportier than you would think on twisty roads. It's not to say it's sporty at all, but let me rephrase it. It's not to say it's like a GTI or anything like that, but it is sportier than you would think. But I think overall, the main thing, the style really turns a lot of heads, gets a lot of attention, and then the packaging was just really, really good. I had some beefs, but we'll start with the good stuff. And I think the packaging overall is the best part.
Yeah. Well, you probably won't race with it on Pikes Peaks, right? So, because it's a bus. So.
But all of the trims of this come with a new APP 550 motor. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. I believe so. I need to double check that, but I believe so.
Yeah, I thought so because I think they've tried to go upscale with it because they had to put such a large battery in it. I'm sure they have to justify that price.
Yeah,
and the price is not cheap. We can talk about that in a few minutes. But
yeah, and by the way, so when I was in Europe, I've seen the short wheelbase, the regular bus, and I totally understand that VW just waited for all the tech to be available, like the new motor that was mentioned, the software 4.0, so it makes it a really I would say spicy car to drive, right? Especially in the all-wheel drive. But we'll get to it. So Tim, what did you love about the Buzz?
Like I said, the packaging was great. I really like the style of the exterior. It looks better in person than I think it does in photos. The interior had some really nice materials, although there were some areas where I felt a little bit let down. But for the most part, I felt it's just really packaged well. It's going to be a great... We can talk about range in a few minutes because that does play into what I'm about to say. Range aside, it's really a good road trip vehicle.
Road trip vehicle. And there is a lot of color combinations. And my understanding is that you have the opportunity to see many of those, like literally side by side, right? So
yeah, we saw most of those. And part of the event was we actually parked all our vehicles at the bottom of Lombard Street, the twisty road, in the famous twisty road in San Francisco. And recreated a famous photo from the olden days, and we kind of went from the bottom to the top, then kind of moved down and around. Most of the vehicles that were available for testing were two-tone. We were in a blue and white one to begin and a red and white one later on in the day. There were a few monochrome, a handful. This one looks better, is a two-tone, generally speaking. I didn't...
Oh, yeah.
The monochromes are a little kind of flat looking, so I really appreciated, I think, the two-tones better.
Yeah, just looking at the configurator online, it looks like that. To me, the shape of the car gets completely lost in the monochrome, and no matter what the color, the black or the silver. I mean, the silver is okay looking, but boy, the two tones really make it pop.
Well, the two tones definitely pop. A black one that I saw on the streets didn't look nearly as good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think about the red and silver? I think one of the options is red and silver.
yeah.
So
I don't think I got a good look at one of those.
okay.
To be honest with you, the one we drove back may have actually been red and silver. I thought it was red and white, but I'm trying to think. I definitely seen photos. And they pop in the photos for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. And so you also, when you get in, you see this spacious interior. Our understanding is that the moonroof that is also available can be monochromatic, so you can very quickly dim it
Yeah,
and open it up. And so how does it feel?
we didn't really mess with that because the weather was
Okay.
just we only drove during the daytime and
I see.
it was overcast, so we didn't really bother with that.
Okay.
But it's a cool feature that it's available. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I really love about the roof that we have in ID.4s, because we both drive ID.4, as you know, Tim,
Mhm.
and what I really like about the expansive roof, that even from the second row seats, you have this beautiful view outside, right? So it's more great experience for the second and potentially third row in the bus than for the first row for the driver.
Yeah, and to that point too, you can also open the rear window in the sliding door. It has like a little uh, smaller window that opens, so you have both a huge view with the window closed, and you can still get some fresh air in the back.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like the electrochromatic roof, it seems like more than just a gimmick. Of course, our ID.4s have the shade that opens up and covers things up. But do you know if the electrochromatic has any kind of UV blocking effect? Because for those of us
I'd have to
without
ask
the built-in,
Volkswagen about that. I don't think they mentioned it to us. If they did, I missed it. I apologize.
oh no, but for those of us
No.
without the built-in UV protection, up here,
Yeah,
it helps
exactly.
to have because I keep my shade closed and the sun's shining hard. But if it
Oh, did you get burned? You need to apply some SPF 30.
Yeah, but
No, I'm kidding.
my kids love the moonroof being open. It makes the cabin feel so much more spacious. And on the ID.Buzz,
It really does. Yeah.
So I think it looks great. But driving wise, you've driven ID.4s, you've driven this. You felt like it drove similarly to the ID.4?
Yeah, steering felt very similar, a little bit heavier, a little more engaging in a sporty way. You can definitely, it's obviously not the same size. You can definitely is bigger if you feel that. But the ride was pretty smooth. It's California, so most of the roads were in good shape. But the ride was on the smoother side. Definitely not upset at all by much. The few potholes we did hit didn't seem to bother too much.
All right. And these come with 20-inch wheels.
Yeah.
Do you know? I'm a smaller wheel guy, bigger tires, and so I've got 18s on my ID.4. I wonder if that would make a difference in driving, or do you have any opinions on that? I know you didn't get to drive anything that was smaller.
Yeah, I don't know. I always feel like bigger tires. I believe the smaller wheel, bigger tire tends to make the ride a little more comfortable. If I have that correct.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
But on the other hand, the ride was not bad at all. So I don't think there's any reason to change it up.
Okay.
Great. So the interior styling, you mentioned 3 rows, the last, and there's so many reviews that already is available up on the internet that you can see. And Tim, are you also publishing an article about your experiences?
Yes,
kind of jumping ahead here.
There will be a review on the website soon.
Perfect.
In the next few days. But yeah, so inside, my biggest complaint with the inside is Volkswagen loves their haptic touch and their touchscreen stuff, and they have continued to do that here. Some of the stuff worked a little better once we got used to it, I think, with the center stack or the navigation system and that sort of thing. But if you want to change drive modes from comfort to sport, it's a couple of different button presses, and it really should just be one knob or switch. Adjusting the temperature, I don't recall off the top of my head if this one has the Hey Volkswagen voice activation. I didn't try it because I had someone else with me in the car and we were talking. But to do it manually, you got to press a couple times to change the temperature, which is a little bit. I've never been a huge fan of the newer Volkswagen haptic touch systems. I think they should be going back to knobs and buttons more. That tends to work better. That said, some of the stuff did work a little better as you got used to it, as you spent more time in the car. So that's my biggest complaint with the interior. I think a lot of things look good. There was some in the first vehicle we drove, sort of wood graining across the dash that looked and felt really upscale. On the other hand, the big panel from the windshield towards the top of the dash was a bit hard plastic, which at this price point would be a little bit, you expect a little softer touch. So there's some hard touch materials in the above the belt line, but Everything looked really good. The seating surfaces looked good, felt comfortable. The seats were really comfortable up until about 45 minutes in, and then got a little stiff. My back was hurting a little bit. But they do have a massaging function, at least the one vehicle I drove. So, that's available for those people who want it. But overall, again, I think the spaciousness of the vehicle really came to mind. The only other thing that was tricky, and this is partly because I'm tall, and so shorter folks probably won't have an issue with this, but the step up on the driver's door kind of put me, I either would step up too high and have to kind of drop into the seat, or I'd step up too low and bang my knee on the steering column. So if that's also because I'm tall and awkwardly proportioned, so it might just be a me problem. For some people, won't even notice it. But again, the pass through to the third row, very easy to figure out how to do it. It didn't require a lot of thinking. Just the switches are really simple. On the seat, the latches, I should say, the release. So
yeah,
it's a really
haptic too.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That was haptic too. A capacitive touch lever for the seat for the.
No, I don't believe so. I believe it was old school.
No, I'm being ridiculous. Yeah,
I was going to say, never even heard of that. I missed the joke there, but yeah.
You can't take me anywhere. I'm sorry.
No, that's on me if you're not catching on.
But it seems like that's something they would do. I'm a Volkswagen lover, so when I criticize them, it's with best intentions. So I think we all share your sentiment about the capacitive touch. I know it's less expensive to put everything.
It's a little bit better than I remember it being in the Golf R, but it still needs work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how about the elephant in the room, the range and charging?
Yeah, so I don't have charging times in front of me. The range, they were saying around, I want to say around like 250 or something like that, or a little bit less than 250 for the rear-wheel drive car.
230-ish.
235 is the range for the rear-wheel drive.
I'm being thrown a bit because when we got in, it was 96%. It was like 243, so it probably was.
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It may have been a little higher. It was because when we got in the vehicle, they'd been parked and they hadn't been being driven hard.
Right.
The
guessometer is showing a much longer range from what I've been reading than what their EPA rating is.
Yeah, sometimes those ratings are conservative, and you get in the vehicle now.
They are,
5 to 10 miles more. But then you start driving, and you start using air conditioning and driving hard, it goes down. So you just got to keep an eye on it. We never really had to worry about range anxiety because we weren't going that far from the city. And overall, though, 230 or even if it's 250, that's a little low for what I would like in a people mover like this. You'd want to get probably 300 miles just because it's going to make it hard to take this. It's going to make it harder to take this on road trips, at least until EV charging becomes more available and quicker. So that's the one drawback. I understand why there's not an ICE or hybrid setup. I get it. It would have to change the dimensions. It would have to use a different platform if that was the case. So that's unfortunate. But if you could get 300 to 350 miles of range on this, I'd feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Right now, this becomes a good people mover around the city. If you're taking kids to school or people to carpool to work and you're charging every night, it's not an issue. Right. If you're trying to go from Chicago to New York City and try to find charging along the way, that's 800 miles you're going to need to charge 2 or 3 times. That's going to be a little trickier.
Yeah. I think, though, for most people, you're not going to be road tripping more than a few times a year.
No, I get that. People don't road trip a ton, but this is just packaged so well for road tripping that's a little bit of a shame.
Right, and they're pushing it toward the surfing and camping and traveling across the country crowd. So the way it's marketed, I get that that would be a shortcoming. For our particular use, we've only been to, we've taken our ID.4 to Orlando and back, which I've mentioned on this podcast before, and that was pretty smooth sailing, but we have 275 miles of range. So, we would stop at 200 to 220 miles in charge. So if there's only 235-ish on the highway, that's really pushing right up against the limit of how far you can go. You want your bladder and your eating needs to be the limit and not the car's range. But yeah, for 99% of the driving, we take our kids all over creation and we're not near the Costco. You run to Costco and you run to the town, 30, 40 minutes away and do that all day long. And you still have plenty. You just don't have to worry about it. So I don't want to scare people off of EVs, right?
No. And there's fast charging for about half hour from 10 to 80%. So it's not,
and
it's not unreasonable.
So the fast charging is fast. And also the good news is that in the next model year, the 2026 will be coming with the North American standard charging system, right? So
AKA the Tesla connector. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So that'll help too. That'll make it a little easier because you have more Tesla charging stations along major freeways and highways than other charging systems.
And Tim, have they been showing you or talking about some exterior or interior mods, especially that is more along the lines the lifestyle, the outdoors and
Yeah,
lifestyle?
so we Assemble Media asked about that, and Volkswagen offered no comment because if they're working together with a third party or on an OEM or their own modification from the OEM side, that's going to be future
Oh,
products, which they don't like to talk about, of course. Anyone who's paid close attention to this industry knows that OEMs are very tight-lipped about future product, generally speaking, unless it serves their needs to actually leak it. Um, so we don't know, but with that big sunroof and with the type of vehicle it is, I would imagine there's going to be, there's going to be something on the line. Like you mentioned before, the surfing and camping crowd. So if you live in LA and you surf on your weekends or, surf in the morning before work, I think there's going to be probably something. Obviously, a lot of people like to camp. There's going to be, I'm sure there'll be something. We just don't know what or specifics yet.
Right. But as far as people that want a big 3-row vehicle, they want to move around 6 or 7 passengers, and they want an electric car. I mean, right now, their choices are the EV9 or this car, really. Or I guess the
Yeah.
Tesla Model X. But you can get the Model 3 with the 3rd row, but you can't put really adults back there.
No, you can't. And this is a lot different than the EV9 for sure.
Right. So people that don't want an SUV, and this is I hate to call it a minivan, but it's a great car for moving people around. It seems like.
I always call it people mover because it's kind of a minivan, but kind of not.
Right.
It's closer to minivan than anything else, but
right.
It's probably not going to compete directly with, Chrysler Pacifica or a Honda Odyssey. Even if it had an ICE powertrain or hybrid powertrain, which the Pacifica has, it still wouldn't be an exact direct competition.
Right. Yeah. I think it's more expensive. It's more luxurious, right?
Yeah.
But
it's more expensive for sure. And I think the pricing is a little bit high, but that being said, I think in the first year, you're going to get a ton of early adopters. Some people who really think it looks cool. So I think they're going to sell everything they can make in the first year to 18 months. I do wonder how that pricing will play in 2 or 3 years when people are looking at it more against competition and less about the novelty. And when enough of them are on the road that they don't look as cool, they don't look as novel, and they're easier to buy. So the price might change. I can't imagine it coming down significantly because no automaker goes that far.
We shall see. We shall see. That there were some options potentially for the federal tax credit for leasing, potential options that were not confirmed. So that might be the good news.
Yeah, and that's another point too. It's because it's built in Germany. You can't get the tax credit on buying, but you can. I believe you can on leasing. I have to double check on that.
But the good news is that the car is really fully loaded. Like we would love to have some features in our ID.4s that this car has, right? So, Wes, thank you for looking up at the trims for the ID.Buzz. So, can you keep us grounded on what are the biggest differences between the Pro S and Pro S Plus?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I looked up the trims here online. So the base model, all the models are fairly well appointed. Even the base includes the power heated and ventilated seats, the heated steering wheel, the 3-zone Climatronic 20-inch wheels, travel assist, and parking and things like that. But moving up to the Pro S Plus, you get things like the head-up display and the overview camera, the 360 cameras, the Harman Kardon premium sound system. The powered doors and lift gate. So on the basic Pro S, it does not include the you have to manually open the doors. And who wants to go to all that effort? But no,
it was fun using the power slide. Although I will tell you one thing. I tried using the key fob to open and close, and I don't know if I didn't press it long enough or what. It didn't work. I don't know. Maybe pre-production vehicles, or maybe there was a setting, a child lock or something like that, but it did not.
Oh, so there is a button there's like an extra button on the key fob that you can open and close the sliding door.
The power slide, like a lot of minivans offer these days, you can. So if you got a handful of groceries or whatever, you couldn't hold a button down. In theory, it just wasn't working. Maybe I was doing something wrong, or maybe there was a problem with the vehicle because. Right. Or it could be a setting, child lock or something, because these were pre-production vehicles, so they may have been a little bit off. And I will also tell you, too, that, excuse me, I accidentally locked and unlocked the vehicle a couple of times because it had, I believe the ID.4 has this, too, where to open your windows, you have to press, a button. And there's only 2 window switches in the driver's door.
That
really easy to accidentally activate the child locks as well.
Exactly.
So there may have been something like that going on.
Yeah. So thank you. You made that comment before because we wanted to make that comment for sure as well.
Yeah.
But the other big thing is though that you can't get the 2-tone paint in the base trim. It's not even
No, I don't think you can. No.
And that's what most people are really going to want. So I think most people are going to want to move up to the Pro S Plus for the 2-tone paint, for the panoramic roof. All those things are or options that you can't
Yeah, honestly, I can't see anyone buying a first edition unless they really have to have that um, cash it. That they're the ones who get the rare models, because I think a Pro S Plus is going to suit most people's needs.
get.
And unless you really need all-wheel drive or
Right.
the extra power of the dual motors, a Pro S Plus rear-wheel drive is probably going to be fine for most folks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But the first edition does come with things that the others don't. So it's less money for the panoramic roof and for the two-tone paint.
Sure,
those things are included where they would not be included. But you can get a first edition without all-wheel drive.
Right.
It starts at 65.5 without the
Yeah, you don't need to get the dual motor, the 4Motion. So,
right.
I think what's going to happen is the first edition is going to go away, obviously, next year, and then they'll just have a higher trim level with some of the same stuff you can't get on the Pro S Plus.
Right. Yeah, it's just if you want to buy right now, if you want to get the two-tone paint and get the panoramic roof and get the captain's chairs, then it's cheaper to buy the first edition, even if you're getting rear-wheel drive, than it is to buy the Pro S Plus and add those options.
Well, the question is if you can buy the if you can buy the non-first edition at this moment.
Right? Oh, right. Who knows? The configurator on the Volkswagen site says you can get that. I don't know if that means
they're not talk to your dealer if you're interested for that. Right. Okay. Great. And so, Tim, how do you think that this will fit into the US market here? Because the European market has been quite popular with the short wheelbase. People already rebuild them as campers. There is like a truck type of or cargo van as well option that is not here in the US. So we have longer, more powerful. So how are you kind of seeing the future of this vehicle?
Well, like Wes said before, there's going to be an appeal to the camper crowd, the surfing crowd. There aren't a lot of utility vehicles that really appeal to that crowd anymore. The Honda Element's been gone for a really long time. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing. It's a lot smaller and cheaper, but you're going to have people who are really outdoorsy but don't go off road. They go to the beach. They go camping in the type of off road that this vehicle can access, right? Like just on a gravel road or on grass. So you're going to see that. I think you might see people who you're going to see people who want a mini. Well, let me rephrase that. You're going to see people who would need a minivan but want to be a little cooler, right? So they're not, it's not a direct competitor to the Honda Odyssey or Chrysler Pacifica, but it's got a lot of similarities in terms of packaging people and cargo. So, if people have a little bit more money to spend or they want more style, they're going to go for this. I think short road trips until the range gets a little bit better. People who go on a road trip and then can charge at the other end, that's going to be under 250 miles. Like people who have a lake house, that sort of thing. You might see tailgaters. I mean, that third row down, and then you could tailgate with this or carry more cargo for sporting event or concert, stuff like that. Yeah. I think the main appeal, though, is going to be buyers who want to stand out because it doesn't really fit into one neat category. I mean, it's a minivan in terms of dimensions and passenger space and how it's packaged, but it looks a little different, right? So it's. I think the main buyer, at least for the first couple, maybe even 3 years, is going to be people who want the looks and want the style. That's going to be the main appeal. Because it is a little more pricey than your average minivan as well. So that's going to be part of it. And then it's also the fact that you only can be EV. There is no hybrid or internal combustion option. So that's going to put some people off. But it may also appeal to some people as well.
Right. There's no other option for that. But don't underestimate how the cool-looking factor, matters to people. I mean, it looks really great. And it
really does. Way better in person than it does in pictures, I think.
And if you want a minivan and you want to be all electric in a minivan, this is your only option.
And again, I think too the stylings, especially the two-tones and the fact there's so many different options and ways to go with the two-tone paint, it's going to really appeal to a lot of different people who just really want to stand out. Like there are, in today's day and age, there aren't that many cars that just look cool. For a variety of reasons. Part of it is just cost, and part of it is the aerodynamics. A lot of cars kind of look the same because we're all trying to get the best fuel economy and performance we possibly can. But this vehicle is kind of taking a step back in time a little bit and showing off style in a way that you don't always see in today's market.
Yeah, and I remember when I saw some of the reviews on YouTube. When I saw the car for the first time, especially from a front side, I got this warm, fuzzy feeling, like very, like literally, like very, immediate pleasure just filled my body, right? And so, do you recall like what was, Tim, your first feeling when you saw the bus in person for the first time, and what
No, I
other?
don't, because the first time I saw one would have been at an auto show a few years ago, and
Okay.
and I don't have a bias towards or against Volkswagen or any other automaker, really. I very rarely. I don't mean to sound jaded, but I've been doing this a long enough time that after a little while, unless it's really something cool, you don't totally get a lot of feelings towards any particular new car. My feeling when I first saw it was, hey, it looks cool. You know, probably the same feeling I have now. Just it looks cool. It's unique. It's different. I will tell you, though, that it got a lot of attention. So when we go on these first try programs, we don't normally get a ton of attention unless it's really, really a unique vehicle. People don't notice, unless they're car nerds, they don't notice the manufacturer plated car that's brand new that you can't buy yet. For the most part, there's exceptions. You know, if it's a Ford Mustang or something, people are going to notice. Toyota Prius, people are going to notice. I think the Kia EV9, which I drove for the first time back in January, got noticed a little bit just because there was nothing else like it on the road. When I went to Asheville, North Carolina a couple of years ago to drive the updated GTI and Golf R, the Golf R got noticed by a Volkswagen fan who tracked me down and followed me, kind of creeped me out a little bit. Just because Golf R fans are very obsessive to detail and they know when it's the new one, even though it doesn't look all that different than the old one.
That's funny.
Yeah, but the ID.Buzz of the past 2 or 3 years, probably the most attention I've gotten from civilians. Like when we parked to take pictures, or got to a stoplight, we got people flashing us peace signs on the Bay Bridge. Like it got noticed, and obviously part of it's the fact that it's two-tone. That just stands out on its own, right? But you don't see a lot of two-tone vehicles out there anymore. But yeah, it got a lot of attention, and we got a lot of questions from people passing by and stuff like that. So that kind of plays back to the whole cool factor thing again, right? Like that's what's really going to draw people to this vehicle.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If it's, do you think there's enough other differentiators besides the cool factor? The cool factor is important.
The EV thing, I think, is going to make a difference for some people. Like I said, some people will be put off by it being only EV, but there'll be others who are attracted to it because it's an EV and they want. It's like you said earlier. There's not really any other EV minivan or something like this. It's an EV, and some people just really want an EV. So that'll help it stand out for a little while, at least until competitors catch up. And like I said, the packaging, it's any van really is going to be packaged well. It's as much as we think minivans are boring, that's why people buy them. And it's not just about hauling children or passengers. It's also about hauling cargo, pets. If you have a job, you have to move a lot around, small items around. It can be helpful to have a minivan, stuff like that. If you tailgate, again, something like that. So in that case, any minivan is well packaged, but this one was particularly, I thought, just spacious. And that's really a big differentiator too, is how much room there is. And I sat in the third row, and you could legitimately have 8 adults. And I don't know if there's enough seatbelts for 8 people, but you could have 2 in the front, 3 in the back on the bench, and then 3 in the third row. Maybe the middle of the third row might be a little pinched, but
right.
you could carpool a bunch of adults in this vehicle, and that's not just for children. So that's a differentiator too, is just how well packaged it is. The only thing I didn't like about the packaging is there's not a ton of space behind the third row up. But that's true of most vans. So it's not. And there was a neat feature, too, underneath the parcel shelf are these 2, I believe they're available and not standard. I'd have to double check that. There's these 2 kind of cargo bins that could hold loose items. They're soft-sided cargo bins. They could hold kids' toys, roadside assistance kits, stuff like that. So the packaging is really, really, really well done. And that's actually one reason why the EV thing works out well. That low center of gravity gives you a flat floor, gives you more space, and also going back to driving dynamics, it also helps it handle better as well.
Totally. And going back to your driving impressions, what we love in our IDs is that when you get in, you don't have to press any turn on button or ignition button, because just hit the brake, put the car in the gear, drive, and then engage the IQ drive that has the lane centering, keeps the distance in the front of the car. So how did that feel to you? Like, did it feel to you as any other car, or was there something special in this experience?
So I was actually a little bit confused, because when I first got in, I thought it turned itself on the way that the IDs do and the way some Volvos do. But it actually does have an engine start, or I shouldn't say engine. It has a motor start-stop on the steering column. You can't see it right away. It's kind of flush with the column. It's on the side. Yep. And we ended up using that because there were times it would shut off automatically when we got out of the vehicle. We wanted to keep it on for photos.
Yeah.
So I was sitting in it and it was raining a little bit, and I was like trying to turn the wiper on, and the wipers wouldn't turn on because and I put my foot on the brake and it still wouldn't turn on. Then I just pressed the button and they turned on. So I'm a little bit confused as to how that works in the Buzz. But it's once I got used to it, it wasn't too bad. It was just press the button, turn it on, turn it off. It's easy to put in the drive, just flip the thing forward, flip it back for reverse, all that. There's a B mode for regenerative to get more regenerative braking as well, which I didn't make much use of. My drive partner did. He said he noticed a difference. So yeah, it was a little bit confusing at first, but once you get used to it, I think you're fine.
Got it. And I think they have moved the shifting lever from the small display that was in the front of the steering column into a stalk.
It's a stalk, yes. It's not the ID, not like the ID had where it was kind of on the gauges. It's a stalk, so it's a little easier to reach, a little easier to. It's more intuitive to learn. I didn't have to think about it, even though I hadn't driven it yet.
And then you mentioned you used wipers, and so the wipers have moved from the right stalk to the left one now, right?
That was a little confusing at first, but not too bad. They were easier to use than like a Mercedes. They were easy to use. I had no problem with it. Because the headlights have been moved off the stalk onto the dash by your left knee. So I wasn't worried about turning the headlights on or off by accident. It was pretty intuitive, pretty easy to learn. I didn't have any problems with it. Sometimes German cars, you have to think through what the icons mean a little more than you do with American cars or Japanese cars. Not with this one. It was fine.
Okay. Good. Go ahead, Jan.
So I wonder, because we are reading some articles that VW is launching like all these numbers of cars, electric cars by 2027 or some like relatively near future, right? So have you had any discussions or have VW talked proactively about what comes into the future to the US?
I would love to break news on the podcast, but unfortunately Volkswagen is very tight-lipped about this sort of thing, like all automakers are. I probably don't know anything more than you know. You might actually know more than I do because you guys are pretty much all Volkswagen all the time, whereas I'm covering all the different automakers. But I don't know anything that has not already been reported, and I didn't get anyone off the record. Sometimes you get something off the record, or someone had one too many gin and tonics and they slip up, but I did not catch anything during the social portions of the trip that would have indicated breaking news.
No ID.7 news then, I guess.
Yeah, nothing like that. I mean, anything that's already out there is already out there, but I didn't catch. Yeah. And they didn't say anything to my memory during the presentation as well.
Yeah. So everyone was. What's the heads up to the PR department there, Jan?
Yeah, the heads up was like, hey, Rachel, kudos. You trained everybody well. Nobody leaked anything, so good job.
Yeah, sometimes they will, during the presentation, hint at future product. I don't recall them doing that. I have to go back to the recording as I write my article, but I don't recall any teasers or any of that sort of thing.
Anything. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Tim. It feels like we have last question or last.
Yeah, I had a couple things I wanted to add. Yeah. So one pleasant surprise. Oftentimes, when it comes to driving dynamics, and this is not going to matter for 99% of people, but when you're driving on Twisty Mountain Road or Oceanside Road in California, you need brakes to feel well. And a lot of EVs, they don't feel great because of the regenerative hardware makes them feel a little bit different. These brakes were stout and progressive and smooth. I wasn't driving super hard, a little slower than I normally would drive, just because it was a big vehicle and also because we had rain early in the day and the roads were a little damp and I didn't want to push it too hard on damp roads that I wasn't super familiar with, a lot of blind corners. So out of safety's sake, I was probably 10 to 20% slower than I typically would be. But even as I started pushing it a little bit harder as the day went along, as the weather got better and the roads dried out a little bit, the brakes, when I did need to use them, were really, really good. I also noticed as I got more comfortable with the vehicle and the roads and found I could go a little faster, you didn't need the brakes as much. So the one pedal really, if you're coming on a corner, or coming up upon a corner, you could let off the throttle. I can't say throttle in an electric car, but the accelerator. You let off the accelerator and it would sort of slow down enough. And as long as the corner wasn't super sharp, or as long as you weren't going in too fast, you could generally one pedal it through. But if you did need the brakes for a slow corner, or because you came in a little too fast, the brakes were really smooth, progressive. The other thing I wanted to touch on, I know I mentioned it briefly earlier, is the ride was really, really smooth. Now, again, California roads, you don't hit many potholes or bad pavement. And the other thing I think I didn't get a chance to really bring up yet, wind noise and tire noise were really well muted. It was very quiet inside. Wow. And usually with EVs, because EVs have less engine, they don't have an engine, they've got motors, because the motor noise is quieter, the powertrain noise, and fumbling for the right term because it's different than an internal combustion car. But typically EVs, because the powertrain is quieter, you notice wind and tire noise more if they're not compensated for in design, and sound deadening and all that sort of thing. And on the freeway, and I noticed it more as a passenger, because when you're driving, you're concentrating on what you're doing. But when I was a passenger, when it was my time to ride along, shotgun with somebody else driving, you start kind of be more aware of sound and that sort of thing. And I didn't hear a ton of wind noise, which with that big windshield and the big A-pillars, I thought you might. It really didn't catch a lot of wind noise, not a lot of tire noise. Outside of one weird section of pavement on the 101, which I think would probably make any tire sound weird. It was generally really, really quiet. And like, I know the guy riding with me took a nap when I was driving. Like he was like, it's so quiet, and he was tired, and he fell asleep a little bit. So
well, that's great.
Yeah.
It's really good to hear.
Yeah. So it's really quiet. And the Harman Kardon sound system is really good too. And, we had satellite radio going, and the music sounded good. So, it's going to be a comfortable place to be inside, whether you're driving or riding as a passenger.
Yeah. It's just, are people willing to spend the money for it? Is what it comes.
Yeah, and that's my three big beefs are the haptic touch, which we've all talked about when it comes to Volkswagen. The pricing is going to put some people off, and then the range, I would love it to be a little bit better. But I also understand that EV range is still, for most vehicles, relatively low across the board. We're still technologically in an infancy stage when it comes to EV development.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope that the battery density, the energy density, and the ratio of weight to capacity will change in
and maybe 5 years from now the range will be 300, 350, even 400 miles. I mean, what's the best range on most gas vehicles? Typically 400, unless they have a huge tank. Maybe 450, 500 for certain hybrids. So they don't need to go that much higher. They don't need to have 600 miles of range. Right. 300, 350, 400 would be, I think, would put it in the comfort zone for most people, especially once it gets the NACS charging, and especially once the charging infrastructure is better in general.
Yeah. The legendary range monster was the 1998 TDI Passat, because it had a 20-gallon tank and got almost 60 miles to the gallon. This is a 1,000-mile car between refills.
Yeah, that's insane.
Volkswagen.
Some other time in this podcast, I'll talk about the time that at a previous job I drove a Passat TDI in 2012 or 2013 from Chicago to Washington, D.C. as a range test, and arrived in it's about a 700 and something mile trip, and I arrived with about 35 miles remaining. I did not hypermile. I drove quite normally through the Pennsylvania mountains. Did an 11-hour drive. Stopped when I needed to stop. Didn't do anything special, and so that was unfortunately, we all know what happened to TDIs, but that was a strong range vehicle too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really an amazing thing. They had a great commercial they did before the scandal broke, where the two guys were arguing at the gas station where they stopped and were filling up before their trip. It's like, literally all you brought were these Spanish CDs, learn Spanish. And then the next time
I remember that one.
In Spanish,
Yeah.
So
I remember that
it was
one.
a good commercial. Yeah. And I think it's funny that we're talking about how you have to change the language for EVs. So you can't say engine. You need to say, I mean, you can.
Yeah. I'm still getting used to it. I know EVs have been a big thing for at least half a decade now, maybe longer, but old habits die hard.
But really, throttle, you shouldn't call anything that's not a carburetor a throttle.
That's true. I mean,
should we go back to the gas pedal?
Yeah.
Accelerator.
Accelerator is the proper term, yes.
Hall effect sensor. I don't.
But even is accelerated the right term? If these cars can be controlled more and more with just one pedal, would it be accelerator going forward? If the car fully stops, I don't know. We'll see.
The accelerator / decelerator pedal.
Yeah. Exactly.
And accelerator.
Accelerator, exactly. There is, by the way, a great video that one of the special guests that we had on podcast did on range, Chris from Battery Life. He compared two different ID vehicles, one with bigger battery, and his conclusion was that the range does not increase linearly with the amount of battery capacity that you're adding, because you're also adding weight, so that decreases the capacity at the same time. And for the Buzz, as we discussed in the past, the aerodynamic resistance can be higher than ID4, so that's why the range can be lower, especially in higher speeds.
It's like the rocket equation, right? You can't just add more fuel and more engines.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so very much, Tim. This was great that you had a chance to jump on and share all these first impressions with all the listeners. Thank you
thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you. So please subscribe to VW ID Talk podcast, and please continue discussing what excites you about driving electric cars on VW ID Talk forum. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.